10.3c is again reviewing all three forms of quadratics. So we have standard form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We've got our vertex form, and we've got our factored form. So remember, these are just three forms, but they mean the exact same thing, right? So three different ways to represent the same equation. So when we are looking at our vertex form and our factored form, if we wanted to rewrite it in standard form, all we would have to do would be to multiply it out, right? Multiply our vertex or our factored form out. And you could use the box method for that, or you could use the arrows. And it really doesn't matter which one of these you pick to multiply out. So let's just practice with our factored form. I'm not going to use my box. I'm going to practice with my arrows for distribution. So we have x times x would be x squared. X times 6 would be 6x. Negative 2 times x would be negative 2x. And negative 2 times 6 would be negative 12. Okay, and then really important, don't lose that a value, right? Since we were multiplying half by our factors, now that we've multiplied our factors out, we still have to distribute that half into our problem. So we have half times x squared. Well, 6x minus 2x is 4x. And again, now we can distribute that half through. And I recommend always leaving that a value for last. That should always be the very last thing you multiply by. So half times x is half x squared. Half times 4x is 2x. And half times negative 12 is negative 6. So we took our factored form and we made it into standard form. And again, that's just as simple as multiplying it out. Let's take a look at a couple more. So we want to write the equation of the parabola in all three forms. So let's go ahead and start off with vertex form. So vertex form is nice because all we need is our vertex and our a value. Well, here's our vertex at the point 2, 2. Okay, so we've got 2, 2 as our vertex. And then our a value, well, normally we would go over 1 and up 1, but here we go over 1 and down 2. So that tells us our a value is negative 2. Let's go ahead and put that all together into our vertex form. Y equals negative 2 times x minus 2 squared plus 2. And notice how my h sign flipped, my k sign stayed the same. Well, factored form. Factored form, we need to know our x-intercepts, right? Our p and our q. So let's take a look at our graph to find those. Well, here's an x-intercept, which is the point 1, 0. And here's an x-intercept, which is the point 3, 0. So we've got 3, and we've got 1 as our x-intercepts. Remember, the very nice thing about these three forms is that the a value is going to stay the same. So we already know the a value for our factored and our standard form. So for factored, we have our a value of negative 2 times x minus p, which is x minus 3, and x minus q, which is x minus 1. So we have our factored form. Last but not least is our standard form. So remember, for standard form, we're just going to pick one of these forms, either vertex or factored, and we're going to multiply it out. So I'm actually going to pick my factored form. Negative 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 1, and I'm going to multiply what's in my parentheses first. Well, x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. Negative x minus 3x is negative 4x. And then last but not least, we just have to distribute that negative 2. Well, negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times negative 4x is positive 8x. Negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. So we have our vertex form, our factored form, and our standard form of all of this same graph. So these are three different things. It's kind of like if you think about your parents, right? They have a first name, so maybe their first name is Shauna. They have what you call them, so you call them mom or dad, and then they probably have what like their associates call them, so like maybe Mrs. Peterson, right? So three different things, but they even though they look different, they mean the same thing. Let's take a look at one more, actually. So same type of thing, we want to write these three forms. This would be a good time to pause the video and see if you can do this by yourself. You do need to remember all three of these forms. So you need to be able to remember that vertex form. You just need your vertex and your a value. Well, looking at this, we go over 1 and we go down from 18 to 16. So we actually go down 2. So our a value for this one is also -2, which tells us our a value for our factored and our standard form. When we put it all together, we get y equals -2 times x minus 1 squared plus 18. That is our vertex form. Well, factored form, we've got those two x-intercepts of -2 and 4. So we just go ahead and plug those into our formula. -2, well, x minus a -2 becomes x plus 2 times x minus 4. Okay, and this would be a good time to practice multiplying one or both of these out. When you do multiply them out, again, you could use your box method to multiply them out if you wanted, or you can use your arrows to distribute. But when you multiply them out, you will get y equals -2x squared plus 4x plus 16. All right, so big idea is that even though we spent the year looking at these three different forms, and they are just three different representations of the same thing.